You know, it is said that stories are the engine that drives all human activities. Okay, that's not true. I just made that up. But now it's been said. But it's true all the same. The stories we tell ourselves about who we are give shape to who we become. Our stories give us direction. They shape how we see the world and the choices we make. Each of us were born into a story, many stories really, a family story, national story, religious story. We may not have had the choice of stories we were born into, but as adults, we have the power to write the ending of our own stories, to take control of them and shape them. What's past is prologue, wrote Shakespeare. So our true story starts now, right now. Of course, the lens through which we interpret the past is also important. How we shape that prologue. It's important, it is as important as the vision we choose to guide our story. You know, the past is fixed. It carries only the weight of memory, though. It only carries the weight we choose to give it. So we must ask ourselves, is the past but prologue? Is it preparation for what is to come? As Shakespeare implied? Or is the past destiny? Does the past determine the future? Or does the present determine the future? What happens now? Is that what shapes what happens next? Now, as I see it, the past is just a story. Our memories are the first-person perspective of that story, of a much bigger story. The first-person perspective is, well, it's notoriously flawed by its self-imposed limits. You know, there's a reason few authors use the first-person perspective to tell a story. We have two eyes because we live in a multidimensional reality. And having two eyes helps us see dimensionally. Same with ears, nostrils. It gives us dimension to our perceptions. The best stories always provide multiple perspectives to help us better understand the truth of the story. Because the more sources that we rely on for data, the closer we get to the truth of the matter, whatever that truth happens to be. Truth doesn't always fit our preconceived stories of how things are. You know, I grew up being taught, and I thoroughly believe, because that's what I was taught in school, and that's what all the books said, and Western science, this was the truth, that Native Americans came to this continent by way of a land bridge, that it was present during the Ice Age between 10 and 15,000 years ago. So the story is that all Native Americans came down, regardless of their own stories, regardless of their histories. That didn't matter. We were told 10 to 15,000 years, boom, that's the end of the story. That's what I learned in all my Native American history classes I took in college, Native American anthropology classes. And there's some evidence that suggests this idea. And I was aware that some people strongly disagreed with this theory. But it was the consensus of Western science that this was the case, and outliers were generally discounted as being non-scientific. Linguists have determined that the Bering Land Bridge theory doesn't take into account the diversity of language in the Americas. And according to a study by Joanna Nichols, using 6 independent linguistic methods for calculating American Indian antiquity, she determined that it would have taken a minimum of 50,000 years for all the American Indian languages to have evolved from one language, or 35,000 years if migrants had come in multiple waves. And she concluded that the unmistakable testimony of the linguistic evidence is that the New World has been inhabited nearly as long as Australia and New Guinea. Of course, this doesn't prove anything one way or the other, but it does serve as evidence that the story we've been told is not as cut and dry as once believed. It is very possible that there were people living here up to 50,000 years ago. And several waves of immigration occurred between 10 and 15,000 years ago as a result of the land bridge. We don't have all the linguistic data because, well, Columbus, right? And the Europeans came, and we don't know how many languages, how many peoples died before they can ever be known by Western science. Lots of questions. Because this idea then leaves into question the original, how did the original humans get into the Western Hemisphere? Isn't that half the fun of a good mystery story? Is that it leads to more questions? Every answer leads to more questions, making the story all the more interesting. Now, a scientific theory is an explanation. It's a story that explains some aspect of our shared world. It is a story that can and should be repeatedly tested, one where every answer leads to more questions. I argue that spiritual stories, like scientific stories, are no different in this respect. Every answer claimed by religious and spiritual teachers should raise countless more questions, and that need to be tested. Now, I generally don't use that word should, because I believe that any claim that we should or should not do certain things, I believe that it should be questioned. Okay, by my own logic then, we should question that claim that all religious and scientific claims should be questioned. But we don't go there right now. That's another topic. Now, as Unitarian Universalists, we pride ourselves on our rational approach to religious thought. It's one of the defining elements of our story. We claim as our sources our own direct experiences of the universe. We claim humanist teachings which counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the results of science, and warn us against idolatries of the mind and spirit. But this is only a partial list of our sources. We claim the wisdom of the world's religions as well, the prophetic words and deeds of men and women that call us to challenge the power structures that conflict with justice, and the very human need for compassion and love. The last source, the last one added even, it is the spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions would celebrate the sacred circle of life and instruct us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. It is this source that I want to focus on today. Because relying on just a single source doesn't give us the whole picture. It limits our perspective. And so limits our access to this multi-dimensional reality that we share. I'm doing it now because this past week our nation again perpetuated the false story of Christopher Columbus with the celebration of the doctrine of discovery, the doctrine that was used to justify the domination of the planet by European colonizers and is still used as legal precedents in our dealings with indigenous peoples of this land. Doctrine of discovery also serves as the guiding vision of this nation. The city on the hill, manifest destiny, American exceptionalism, they're all variations on this theme. And this suggests to me that we need a new story, a new vision to guide us towards sustainable and a more just future. Now, anthropologist Jeff Jenkins points out that several Native American cultures, from high in the Andes to the deserts of New Mexico, come visions and prophecies, some ancient, some modern, all with the common theme of arriving at a point in time when the human family would face the choice of evolutionary transformation into a symbiotic presence within the more than human world, or to continue the destruction of the planet. Now, before I go any further, a word about this word prophecy. Unitarian Universalist theologian James Luther Adams, he makes the point that prophecy in this context is not about foretelling the future. He uses the word forthtelling. It's a vision of what could be based on what is going on now. A prophecy is a story that takes us from where we are to where we could be or where we want to be in the future. It's a story. The prophecies and visions in question, in short, state that in the time before history, all people were one. And then a split occurred when some followed the path of the condor and others followed the path of the eagle. There it is. Some say that the condor represents the native people of South America and the eagle are those who live in North America. It is believed by others, however, that the condor represents the path of the heart, the path of compassion and intuition, and the eagle, the path of the head, the path of mind and the material world. According to author and researcher Robert Tyndall, one version of the prophecy comes from Laura Hinestrosa, a Peruvian healer who now lives in Mexico City. It states that the historical cycles of the Incan peoples at the end of the 8th Pachacuti, or 500-year cycle, the eagle peoples would dominate the condor peoples for one Pachacuti, or 500 years. And this coincides with the arrival of Europeans with their extractive economy and industry, leading to the exploitation, depopulation, and even genocidal eradication of the indigenous peoples of the Americas. The reign of the Eagle peoples was foretold, and it was said it would bring the people of the Condor nearly to extinction. And the prophecy states that in the 10th Pachacuti, from the end of the 20th century, would be a time for the peoples of the Condor and the Eagle to come together. Come together in a creative symbiosis to restore and regenerate the earth community. Tyndall writes that one marker of this opening of the 10th Pachacuti is the emerging unification of indigenous peoples and traditions north and south, as well as the indigenizing of Westerners previously without native consciousness of connection to the earth and its larger non-human community. Now, last year in North Dakota, is that not exactly what happened? We saw not only native peoples from North and South America come together, but native peoples from every continent making a united stand. And every year, more of us Westerners are rejecting the objectification of nature, rejecting the ethic of domination that is the ultimate source of many of our modern problems. And we're reclaiming our native intuitions. According to Phil Lane Jr. of the Four Worlds International Institute, the reunion of the condor and eagle is intimately connected to other indigenous prophecies across the Americas. And so strong is the belief in this prophecy, in these stories, that the Otomi peoples in the state of Mexico have built a vast ceremonial amphitheater dedicated to the reunion of the condor and the eagle. The focal point of this amazing construction is a gigantic stone carving of a condor and an eagle joined in a loving embrace. This whole thing was built largely by volunteer labor, thousands of materially poor indigenous peoples, out of love and faith in the prophecy. A traditional Western, or traditional scientific, or traditional UU approach to this prophecy might be to ask for evidence that it is real. We ask for proof that it is more than wishful thinking or the product of some psychedelic vision brought on by ayahuasca or some other hallucinogen. Because reason is so foundational to our religious identity, to our story, I fear at times that we too readily discount aspects of life that don't neatly fit into what we consider rational. One perspective that we claim out of many. Is love real? Is it rational? What is the proof that love is anything more than a figment of our imagination? Is it just a product of wishful thinking? Love, compassion, they generally defy rational thinking. And any attempt to explain away the biochemistry falls short because we can't say what comes first, the feeling or the chemistry. Did the neurotransmitters create the feeling we call love? Or did love cause the brain to release the dopamine and serotonin? While love clearly causes non-rational behavior, and it can't be fully explained through rational exploration. Our observation of this world shows us that love and compassion are the building blocks of any happy and healthy human society. So whether it is real or not, whether it is the cause or the effect, it's our story. And we act as if it were real. And in so doing, we make the world a better place for everyone. Imagine this world without love and compassion. When we ask whether a myth, a prophecy, a belief, a God, when we ask if they are real, when we demand a proof for the existence of God or goddess, I believe we are misusing reason. I feel a better line of questioning would be, does acting as if this story, myth, prophecy is true, acting as if it was true, inspire a positive or negative outcome? If I act, for example, as if a loving and caring God exists, and this God's only commandment for me is to be loving and caring to my fellow humans, then what is the likely outcome? At the same time, if I act as if a judging and spiteful God exists, and this God's only commandment is to love and obey it or face eternal punishment, what is the likely outcome? We see it. We all know people who believe in that judging God and so are very judging. People who believe in the loving God so behave lovingly. Nobody's perfect, but we do our best. Asking proof for God is actually an irrational response from my perspective. It's like asking me to prove to you that I'm hungry, that I am feeling hungry. Because God, like hunger, like love, is a subjective experience. So by definition, cannot be scientifically proven or explained. Because by definition, science can only deal with objective reality. That which can be measured, observed. And you don't know what I'm thinking right now. You may think you do. And I don't know what you're thinking right now. Though I can guess, at least some of you. Direct observation and experience shows us that a shared vision can inspire hope and create real and lasting change in the world. How do we foster shared vision? Rational discourse and debate? Or through stories and myths and prophecies that speak to us at the deepest level of our being? Name a history-changing movement in the 20th century, just in the 20th century, that didn't utilize the language of myth. Name a movement that didn't have a clear vision for a better, more inclusive world. The social gospel, women's suffrage, civil rights, India, South Africa. At the core of every movement was a vision, a shared vision that united and empowered people to do what others said was impossible. A movement that defied reason itself. when we consider the prophecy of the condor and the eagle, the most important question to consider is this: would acting as if this prophecy is true produce a positive or negative outcome? Would it be good for me and the planet to follow this vision or not? Reason is but a means to an end. It's a tool, very useful tool, but in the end just a tool. Stories are tools. Religion is a tool. It's important not to make idols of our tools. There are those who would worship reason, that would put it on the pedestal and claim it as the source and way. The only source, the only way. But reason alone, my reason tells me that reason alone will not inspire the changes we need to make to save ourselves and our planet. But a good story can. A good story, grounded in the full breadth of human experience, can inspire real change in people. For many people, the prophecy of the condor and the eagle is that story. True or not, belief in it has created real, concrete results. Real, concrete results. It created this amphitheater. And it has brought native peoples from around the world together for common cause. It's a story that is necessary today. It doesn't have to be the only story. The best stories have multiple ways, all leading to a common goal. But this is a story, I believe, that can truly change our world. In his book, Tribes, author Seth Godin writes, "There's a myth that all you need to do is outline your vision and prove it's right. Then, quite suddenly, people will line up and support you." In fact, the opposite is true, he says. Remarkable visions and genuine insight are always met with resistance. And when you start to make progress, your efforts are met with even more resistance. The forces for mediocrity will align to stop you, forgiving no errors and never backing down until it's over. If there were any other way, he says, it would be easy. And if it were any other way, everyone would do it, and your work would ultimately be devalued. The yin and yang are clear. Without people pushing against your quest to do something worth talking about, it's unlikely to be worth the journey. Persist, he says. Persist. It has long been the role of the religious community to provide the vision, to be the source of hope and promise that will help lead to a better tomorrow. And it's the role of this religious community to hold ourselves and our community accountable. But to do this, our vision must be clear, and our prophetic story must be compelling. We have a compelling story. Unitarian Universalism is a wonderful story. It is your story. It is this story, the story of this community. But for this story to change lives, it must escape these walls. It must be shared. So let us strive today and every day to share our prophetic story to those in desperate need of a clear path forward. And if you're not sure what our story is, how to talk about it, join us Wednesday nights for articulating our UU faith classes, so that you know what our story is and you know how to share it. The ball is in your court, now and always. So be it. Amen. Blessed be.